When people think of pest species in Australia, they instinctively think of the rabbit, and quite rightly, because it's causing enormous environmental harm. But there's another species that's insidious, that's flying under the radar, that doesn't get nearly as much attention as it should, that does just as much damage as the rabbit, plus it predates on native species, and that's the feral pig. I'm here today to talk about feral pig control with Heather Channon, who's the National Coordinator of the Feral Pig Program. Heather, how are you?
Good, thank you very much.
Heather, pigs have been in Australia since 1788. They were actually brought out on the first fleet. Tell me a little bit about what happened with the pigs specifically that made it such a terrible pest.
Well, feral pigs at that point escaped the fencing that was surrounding them, and they got out into the environment. And because they're so adaptive, resilient, and really intelligent, they can live in many types of habitat across Australia. So they can live in areas where it's snowing up in the mountains to really dry areas. Like in parts of remote Western Australia where you just think, gee, pigs would live here. So as long as there's food, water and shelter available, and that's permanent water, so there's good sources of water, which is what they rely on, because pigs don't sweat, so they need to have a permanent source of water. They can live in many different habitats across the country, so they'll inhabit up to around 45% of Australia's landmass.
And you're talking about pigs even in alpine areas,
yes,
and they're doing
right.
Significant damage up there?
Feral pigs have huge environmental impacts. So they can be impacting on native vegetation, native fauna. They can be predating on ground nesting birds, digging up areas where there may be freshwater turtles. There's so much damage that they do, but they're very smart in how they do that. So they're quite ubiquitous. They'll be sporadic in their nature because they're always on the hunt for protein as part of their diet, because they need at least 15% crude protein in their diet. So they're always out there selecting different areas to obtain their protein, their dietary protein. So that their impacts, they can impact on at least 140 threatened species, and it's just enormous amount of damage that feral pigs can do just to the environment, let alone to agriculture and to cultural assets.
So that's the natural ecology. For farmers, they're more than a threat for just spreading foot and mouth disease, aren't they? They come with a host of diseases that farmers need to be aware of.
They do. They're able to transmit a host of exotic, endemic and zoonotic diseases. So, foot and mouth disease and African swine fever are two major exotic diseases that Australia is free of right now.
They are in New Guinea though, aren't they?
They are.
So we're very, very close.
And African swine fever has also been detected been confirmed in Timor-Leste, which was initiated with the National Feral Pig Coordinator Program by the Australian Government, the program that I'm employed through. So the risk of exotic diseases is there, but they're also capable of spreading endemic diseases. So if they're in environments where they're close to domestic piggeries, for example, they're able to transmit diseases to those pigs.
Now, endemic diseases, of course, are diseases we already have in Australia.
Yes, that's right.
But we want to contain them to certain places, locations or regions so that we can control them.
Yes, that's right. And the other thing too is it's also zoonotic diseases, diseases that humans can also be impacted by, and that will include leptospirosis, brucellosis, Q fever, Salmonella, E. coli. There's a host of different diseases that feral pigs can carry, as well as around 30 different parasites that pigs will carry. So from a disease transmission perspective alone, it's huge. And they're also involved in the transmission of Panama disease tropical race 4, as well as Phytophthora.
For banana growers? Yep.
As well as Phytophthora, which can impact on our native bushland, as well as to horticultural crops. So the widespread significance of the feral pig just means that they are one of Australia's worst invasive species.
Now, the way that they hunt, the way that they graze and the way that they move across the landscape might mean that farmers have pigs without realising it. We often attribute pigs to damage of wallows in creeks, broken sugarcane, various other signs, obvious signs that we have pig damage. But we might have pigs on our property and not even know it.
That's true. And often, of course, they'll be travelling through the landscape at night time, or they're picking certain times of the day where they feel safer. So we may not often see them either.
So what are some of the signs that farmers could perhaps look for, more subtle signs that they might have a pig problem that they might not realise?
Well, first of all, if you've got animal tracks through the landscape, just looking at those and seeing if you've got pig sign, just their footprints in those tracks, on those trails. It may also be you may find rub marks on trees, particularly close to water, where they'll be rubbing themselves against trees. Of course, wallows and other signs of damage where they've been rooting in the environment. So it's really about being aware of what that looks like, and a lot of people in areas where people aren't, or where the feral pig isn't as dense in population and is probably becoming more of an emerging problem, land managers may not be aware of what feral pig sign looks like.
So education is very important. Mm-hmm. You're also telling me off camera that people who don't necessarily pregnancy scan their ewes might be missing lambs, might be losing lambs to pigs and not even know it.
That's right, because when feral pigs predate lambs, and there are losses that have been attributed to feral pigs of around 40%. So it's a significant problem they can have. But the feral pig will take the entire lamb, unlike a dog, where you will find remains of the lamb on the ground. The feral pig will most likely always consume that lamb, and so you won't find any sign. You may find wool in scat or in their poo if you're in the environment, but that just shows you how you may not recognise you've got a problem, but they're actually there.
Heather, pigs breed particularly well too, don't they?
They do, and when there's good, under good seasonal conditions, they can have 2 litters every 12 to 15 months, and the litter size can vary between 4 to 10 to 12 piglets at a time. So you can see here how quickly the population can expand. And because the breeding cycle of a pig is 3 months, 3 weeks and 3 days, we can even have her female progeny from her first litter pregnant and having piglets at the end of the first year. So this population can get rapidly out of control if we're not working together to control them effectively.
So they literally do breed like rabbits. What's the population in Australia at your best estimate at the moment?
Oh, that's a lovely question, Tim. A lot of people ask me that question. There's been estimates back in 2020 in some work that was done and published that the population's around 3.2 million. But I would say, and of course there's a big range in all of that, but I would also say that we've had some fabulous seasons between 2020 and now. So the population, of course, has increased. To what? I can't tell you. But I would say from the reports that land managers are saying that the damage is out there. They're seeing an explosion in pig numbers, and that's reflective of course, those favourable conditions that have supported reproductive potential of the pig.
So with numbers like that, we could expect that there'd be a lot more than 3.5 million pigs in Australia at the moment.
That could be assumed, Tim, yeah.
How many need to be removed from the system before we start to see a decline in their population?
Okay, so because of that, the reproductive potential of the pig, we need to remove at least 70% of the population in an area just to keep the growth just to keep the numbers the same as what they were before.
So just to keep the population stable, you've got to remove 70% of the pigs every year. Mm-hmm. Just to keep on top of the breeding potential.
Yes, and that is it's an extremely challenging issue, because for the majority of programs and people involved in feral pig control, knowing how many are there in the first place is really it's quite difficult. And we put a lot of our effort, because resources are tight, into management rather than doing monitoring. But in all of this, I implore people to think about what they can be doing to monitor populations of pigs, to try and get an estimate of that population, or at least looking at what the impact is, so that you know that the work that you're doing on the ground is worth it, and all the effort that's being applied is actually getting a reduction in the impacts that people are experiencing from feral pigs. And that's a huge thing, because it helps to keep people motivated, because we need to keep on top of this problem for a long time. We can't do that, the sporadic, there's an issue, we'll deal with the pig and we'll go back to what we were doing before and forget about it. The pig won't forget, and the pig will just keep doing what it does. and the population will then start to increase again, and we just go back and do the same cycle. So we end up with this wave of activity and the wave of population growth, and we will never get on top of the problem in that way. We need that sustained effort by groups of land managers working together to actually get on top of this.
And that's what the National Feral Pig Program does so well, is it tries to coordinate citizen science, government and various other control groups that have a vested interest in controlling the pigs. There are various means of control. Tell me about some of the most effective tools that are used on pigs at the moment.
Yeah, so in many areas, it's all about population control. So looking at methods that will remove populations. In many areas it may be baiting, followed by aerial shooting. That are the two key methods that are used. In other areas where baiting may be sensitive, trapping may also be utilised as well. So it really comes down to picking out those combinations of control methods, whether it is baiting with 1080 or with hog on, aerial shooting, with trapping, with ground shooting to mop up remaining individuals, and of course the use of exclusion fencing as well to protect land. They're all the methods that are used. It's about how we use them, when we use them, at the right time, in the right way. So it's really making sure that we can apply them all to maximise the outcomes that are being achieved. And again, there's no recipe for feral pig control, so it'd be great to be able to say to everybody, do this, this and this, and that'll work.
But it depends on your local environment and how your pigs are travelling through it.
It does.
Now, fencing is dear to my heart. There's a lot of fencing on my channel, and it's interesting to note that fences were the reason for the pig problem to begin with in 1788, because obviously old-fashioned fences are no match for a pig. There is some new technology available now that you guys are having a look at, and the use of power in fences to manage pigs across the landscape. What impact is that going to have, that new technology, on the control of pigs? What are some things that you're hoping to be able to do with those sort of fences?
Well, I think in lots of ways it's about asset protection, and that's where the use of fencing plays a big part here. I think that it's also about how the fencing is incorporated into a management program, because just by putting a fence up, you're not actually removing the population necessarily. You're maintaining it. Yes, but you also make sure that when you're doing that, is that you're maintaining your fence and not just thinking, now that I've got a fence up, everything will be perfect and it'll be fine.
A lot of permanent water sources and a lot of high protein feed are found on farms. Obviously, if we can exclude pigs from farms, that's going to remove a lot of the habitat and a lot of the food sources for those large populations, isn't it?
Yes, it will. Of course, it'll all come down to the costs and benefits from installing fencing and how that fits in to that actual property management, and both at the property level and at the landscape level as well. So it's it could even be around how you're designing other types of control around those fences. So can you design it so the pigs will move along and end up being trapped, for example? Of course, once you have that fence up, the management of animals within the fence just becomes a lot more ideal. You can actually remove populations of feral pigs as well as other vertebrate pest species that may be inside the fence to help with improving productivity on the farm.
Farmers are excellent land managers, and if they're given the tools to manage the land, they often do a very good job.
Amazing job. Yeah.
Heather, thank you very much for your time today. It's great to talk pigs. It's great to talk diseases. I'd like to reference your work a little bit more. If people are interested in your work and what you're doing, they can get onto the National Feral Pig Management Program. And you guys have a conference coming up, I believe.
We do, in 2 weeks' time. So we're having the second conference, a dedicated feral pig conference, holding it on the Gold Coast. Yep. And looking forward to catching up with many of those people involved in those practical management programs, learning about new techniques and new approaches that are being applied in different areas to help with combating the problem. Because while we've got this suite of control measures, it's about how we use them more effectively, which is a big part of this, because we've really got to think about the management of pigs in ways that, being smarter about it and being a lot more consistent in the approach, having that sustained effort, but really again whatever we can do there to support people to work together in coordinated groups, that'd be great, because we do know, even from other vertebrate pest programs, that the most successful management programs are where people are working together in the landscape. Because often properties are smaller than the home range of the pig. So if we don't work together, it just feels like there's a constant wave of pigs coming onto a property. So it's really there about what we can do to get more information, understanding our landscapes better, and working more closely together.
And adapt and use new tools and old tools together as they become available.
Yeah, exactly. As well as we're doing what we can do to promote the use of monitoring. So whether it's with cameras, looking at photo point monitoring, looking at physical sign like we talked about before, all those things are really important, and tracking that over time to make sure that really just to see is what we're doing working, and if it's not, can we improve it? This whole thing is all around continuous improvement and how we manage the pig.
Well, I'm going to be doing more on pigs over the next couple of weeks. Make sure you hit the little subscribe button and give it a like, and share this story with someone who has an interest in pigs, or perhaps has a problem they don't even know about. Heather, thank you very much for your time on the channel.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.